Can I just say that I think one of the reasons people don't give is they don't have a vision. I think before the giving has to come vision, some kind of vision, firstly of the Lord himself. And I know giving was always very relatively easy for me. I needed counsel when to be willing to spend on myself and then my family. But I had just such a vision. I knew what those gospels could do. The first place I raised money for, my own high school, and I got the principal to agree that I could give out gospels in the high school. Today it's illegal. 1,000 students promised to read the gospels. I raised the money from a friend in a church parking lot. I still remember the day, though that's some 56 years ago. So may we go from here in this book, Operation World, which is probably considered the greatest missions book of all times, that'll increase your vision on all the nations. Every nation in the world is covered. All kinds of information, prayer requests. It's a prayer diary. And though we're not giving it free, we're giving it close to half price. Pick it up tonight if you possibly can and push it to others. We need to increase our vision. A lot of people have the idea, for example, this is really important, that the world is more or less almost evangelized. There are 40 nations that have less than 1% of what you have here in Portland. Every time I come to Portland, I meet negative people who are moaning about how unreached Portland is, how unchurched. You've only got, how many churches in Portland preaching the gospel?
I don't know.
A lot.
A lot.
Yeah, I've been coming here every year for 50 years. We have 40 nations, listen, and there is a need in Portland, and I hope you'll preach the gospel here. And you, fine. 40 nations with less than 1%. North Korea, Tibet, Afghanistan, Iran, Iraq, Somalia, Tibet, Yemen, Saudi Arabia, Libya, Tunisia, Turkmenistan. We have a long way to go. And in other countries where we hear about tremendous things happening, like India, guess what? Tremendous things are happening. But there's so many hundreds of millions in those countries that have never heard that all the stories of God blessing, if we're not careful, create a distortion. And we think we're almost there. We're not almost there. There's 7 billion people in the world. Hundreds of millions have nothing. In Africa, hundreds of millions of new believers, struggling believers, they get written off, they get criticized. I hear tremendous things against our African brothers and sisters. Hundreds of millions, I'm told, or at least 100 million. And I would ask how many of those are illiterate. But let's be safe and say tens of millions who love Jesus don't yet have their own Bible. We got a weird thing going on. We spend millions and millions on Bible translation. I believe in it. And after we translate, guess what? We never give it to them. Millions who have a Bible translated, hundreds of millions don't have a Bible, a New Testament. Many have not seen the Jesus film or had a gospel tract. That is my number one passion among all these other things. And I'd ask you to pray about releasing finance for this kind of distribution of scriptures, and we will see many in heaven. When you get that vision, you will find, like me, very hard to spend money, and we will come and counsel you and help you to spend some money, you know, on your dog or your cat or your family. Yeah.
So, question, George.
Question. Woo!
If somebody's heart was touched there with the idea, okay, Bible's been translated in their language, but a lot of these people don't have it. In some cases, some of the people can't read, and they need to be taught to read. Okay, but they don't even have it. Okay, so where do you? There's audio Bibles, right? That's a great ministry. Okay, where do you give? Does OEM have something in its structure, or what organizations? If that specific vision for the thing you just said, where should people send their money?
Well, I think OM is one of the groups that is specializing in this. The Birth of the Ship Ministry is tied into wanting to reach the masses with the Word of God. The Ship Ministry has reached 100 million people. We're not talking about people being saved, so let me be careful in my definition. We're not even saying they're evangelized or they've had enough. We're saying at least they had one opportunity to hear the gospel. That night in the Billy Graham meeting for me was already like the third or fourth opportunity. I had the gospel, and I probably had one or two other exposures. But that's the first time anybody ever made it clear that I could be born again, I could know Jesus that night. Wham! Of course I responded. Down the aisle in front of 20,000 people. Everybody needs the chance that George Verwer had that night in that Billy Graham meeting. And you and I, with our money, can make it happen. So of course, do your research, find out what groups are doing. Oswald J. Smith, who taught us so much about money, you know what he said? Some of you won't like this. He said, don't give the things in America that even unsaved people will give to. And there's a lot of relief and development stuff, and I believe in that. Unsaved people will put their money into it. So those who are committed to seeing people saved, we want to see people saved. We believe Jesus is the only way, truth, and the life. No man cometh to the Father but by him. Even many theologians in our good evangelical colleges don't believe that anymore. And we have popular books that tell us heaven is just a figment of our imagination or unscriptural teaching. So I would agree with Oswald J. Smith. Those of us who believe people are lost need to be involved in investing in direct evangelism. Scriptures, preaching, anything that's direct, sending missionaries to the unreached people. Many American missionaries are now returning because they can't get support. We now have churches that boast in America that they don't support Americans. People have been bad-mouthing American missionaries big time for the last 50 years. A whole new book, all written against American missionaries by a man who claims to be a believer. We need to stand against these lies. We need American missionaries. If they're godly, if they love Jesus, not in the same places, and certainly not always the same style as even when I went to India. It's a different day, but people are needed, especially in those 40 most unreached nations of the world. Forgive me for going too long. You know, preachers, we got that weakness.